and welcome back everybody to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. Without further ado, let's jump into the exciting new commander for today's video. What I've got for you today is Voja, Jaws of the Conclave. She's 2, a red, a green, and a white for a 5/5 wolf. She's got Vigilance, Trample, and Ward 3, because of course you have to include the Ward 3 on every commander creature now. And whenever she attacks, you put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control. And then you draw a card for each wolf you control. So right off the bat, there's kind of 3 different ways that you could go about this deck. One is just super aggressive attack strategy. I mean, you've got this 5/5 Vigilance Trample commander. You could play Voltron. You're in Naya, so you can pump it up. You can give it haste. You can do all these fun things with it. Combat. That's not the direction I want to take the deck. Also, there's elves involved. There's kind of an elf in the art picture, but other than that, I don't know why they decided to put elves in there. But this would be an excellent elf ball commander. Again, you're in Naya, you're in all the relevant elf colors, and being able to put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control based on a number of elves, I mean, it's just elf ball on steroids, right? So you could just take this totally in the direction of elves. That's not the direction I want to go. You could go kind of 50-50. That's probably where a lot of people will want to do this, where it's a little bit more creative. You're combining elves and wolves. You got to kind of play around with the ratios in the deck. But for me, I saw this. I was like, I really want to lean into the wolf side of this. I want to go completely card draw. I want to draw a ton of cards when this thing attacks. And we're gonna play wolf typle, and this is just gonna be a wolf deck through and through. Again, we're in the perfect colors for it. Maybe would have liked to have some black in there, but that's okay. Yeah, this deck is gonna be all about wolves. So without further ado, let's look at some wolves. First is Pack Song Pup. It's 1 and a green for a 1/1 wolf. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control another wolf or werewolf, you put a +1/+1 counter on Pack Song Pup. And when it dies, you gain life equal to its power. So this is one you get down early, right? At the beginning of combat, you're most likely going to control another wolf because we got tons of wolves. This guy will get bigger and bigger and bigger until he becomes too big. People got to get rid of him, and then you'll be able to take advantage of that life gain. It's just a super simple, super easy way of getting a wolf onto the battlefield that will churn out value as the game goes on, and finally, even when it dies, give us something in return. Immerwolf is 1, a red and a green for a 2/2 wolf. It has Intimidate, meaning it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it, so red and green creatures. So black creatures, blue creatures, white creatures, can't block it at all. Other wolf and werewolf creatures you control get +1/+1, so a nice lord effect there, static ability. And then non-human werewolves you control can't transform. So we don't have any werewolves in this deck. We're not worried about that at all. It would be kind of cool to run a werewolf deck with this card, but for what we're doing now, we're much more worried about that static effect. And it's going to be able to pump our whole team. Tolsimir Wolfblood is 4, green and a white for a 3/4 elf warrior. Now it itself is not a wolf, but other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Other white creatures you control get +1/+1. And you can tap it to create Voja, a legendary 2/2 green and white wolf creature token. So, on its face, just being able to create a different Voja means flavor-wise this is going in the deck for sure. But the other double lord effect with the green and white creatures, that's 2/3 of our deck. There's going to be a lot of team pumping with this card. But even as we're doing wolf typle, we do want to make sure that we're able to turn that into a win con in terms of our attacking. So we've got cards like Shared Animosity with 2 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So all of our wolves are going to be pumping all of our other wolves. We're going to be able to turn a pretty moderate board state into a ton of damage with this card. Gruul War Chant is 2, a red and a green for an enchantment. Attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 and have Menace. So the Menace there is really the key. Being able to give all our wolves Menace when they're attacking is going to be crazy. Then we've got Master Warcraft. It's 2 and 2 Boros, so either red or white, for an instant. And you cast this spell only before attackers are declared. We choose which creatures attack this turn, and we choose which creatures block this turn, and how those creatures block. So this is a super versatile card. Most often you see it used by someone on their turn for their combat. It means they get to attack for free wherever they want. They choose no blockers at all. But you can also play around with playing it on other people's combat steps. Right? If you're kind of in a 3-person game at this point, and you're kind of seen as the threat and they're ganging up on you, you wait until the person with the best attacking creatures or whatever decides to go to combat, cast this spell, you send all their creatures at their opponent, make sure their opponent doesn't block, and you can incidentally basically just kill one of the opponents off the bat with a card like this. This is going to be a beautiful surprise for either your benefit. Well, it'll be your benefit either way, but it'll either be on your turn for your attackers or changing the direction of someone else's attack. And then this next section is all about creating more wolves, right? Because we've got tons of wolf creatures in our deck. We want to be able to make wolf tokens, right? To just increase the number of cards that we're going to be drawing when Voja comes down and attacks. So the first is silver for Partisan. It's 2 and a green for a 2/2 wolf warrior. Has trample. Whenever a wolf or werewolf you control becomes the target of an instant or sorcery spell, you put a 2/2 green wolf creature token on the battlefield. So now this does rely on our opponents to a certain extent, but it's a bit of protection, right? As people are going to try to pick off our wolves, we're going to be able to kind of replenish them, basically, because if someone's trying to knock down one of our wolves, then we get to bring one right back. Howling Moon is 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target wolf or werewolf you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Pump effect is excellent on its own, but then the second ability, whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. This is going to go off. I guarantee it. I mean, you get this down on turn 3, right? At that point, everybody else is going to have 4 or 5 mana to play on each of their turns or more. The likelihood of players casting 2 spells or more on their turn is super high. You're gonna churn out a ton of wolves with this card. And then Howl of the Night Pack is 6 and a green for a sorcery, and you put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield for each forest you control. So, this might be a little bit more effective in a mono green wolf deck, but we're running easily 10, 11, 12 forests in this deck. So being able to get this down and potentially create 5 or 6, I don't know, for 7 mana is crazy. It automatically means we draw 5 or 6 more cards with Voja. It's a bit of a splash play, but it's one that's going to be really effective. And this brings us to the vegetable portion of the deck. As with every budget deck, you got to make sure you eat your veggies, including cards in your deck that will help to consistently bring out the gameplay that you're looking for. Because if you don't make sure you have these cards, then you're not going to be able to keep up with the decks at the table that have just higher budgets, better cards, access to better strategies and mechanics than we do. So I kind of break those up into 3 groups: mana ramp, card draw, and removal. And I'm going to go through each of those categories now with a few cards that fit into each one. So the first is Farseek. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery. You search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Basically a rampant growth for everything but a forest. And speaking of rampant growth, you've got Rampant Growth. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. Battlefield tapped. Gotta clarify that. And then we've also got Cultivate. It's 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards. Put one on the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then shuffle. So each of those super simple. We're just looking to get more lands on the battlefield to cast more wolves. In terms of card draw, again, Voja is an excellent card draw engine, but she's much more of a splash play, right? You're attacking with her and hopefully drawing 5 to 8 cards, depending on how many wolves you got. But if we want more consistent, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, but things that are more likely to last throughout the game, we've got Lifecrafter's Bestiary. It's 3 mana for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you scry 1, so a little bit of card advantage there. And when you cast a creature spell, you may pay a green. If you do, draw a card. So we're going to be casting a ton of creatures in this deck, so being able to just pay a green and draw a card, that's going to be a great supplement to what we're trying to do with this deck. Next card here is Hunter's Insight. It's 2 and a green for an instant. Choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. Now this is where we're most likely going to be hitting Voja with this. Depending on the board state, would not be surprised if this gets you 10 cards. She's already a 5/5, and with all of the Lord effects, the pump effects, the combat tricks we'll be playing, I wouldn't be surprised if you're able to get her in for 10 damage, pay 3 mana, bring this out. It's going to be a bit of a blow-up play, but it's super good in this deck. Then finally we got Gift of Estates. It's 1 and a white for a sorcery. I actually really like this card. So if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for up to 3 plains cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So it's just drawing plains. I get it. But for 2 mana, for a way to kind of, if you're missing your land drops, if you're getting mana screwed, this is a perfect way to make sure you stay up with the rest of your opponents. And yeah, I mean, getting just plains out of your deck, maybe not the coolest thing on its own, but you got to remember it's taking those plains cards out. So when you're drawing more cards later in the game, you're less likely to hit those lands that are just going to be dead in your hand. And then in terms of removal, we've got access to white, which is just excellent in terms of removal rates. Got Path to Exile here. It's a white for an instant. Exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We've also got Swords to Plowshares. It's another white for an instant. You exile target creature, and its controller gains life equal to its power. So both of these, you often see them together. They're very similar. It gives you an excellent rate for a very low mana cost. It does benefit the opponent for a bit, but ideally you're targeting creatures that, if you left them out, would benefit them way more. So it's never a bad idea to bring this guy out. And last, you've got Generous Gift. It's 2 and a white for an instant. You destroy target permanent, and its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. A little bit more mana, obviously, but it's much more versatile. You're hitting not just creatures. You're able to hit pretty much anything that's a threat, and it's just going to be a good exchange for you. And that brings us to the Thrift pick of this deck. For those of you who haven't seen the channel before, the Thrift pick is the card that maybe I don't necessarily think is the best card in the deck, but it's the card that I'm most excited to play. Most excited to see how it interacts with the board. Most excited to see how it helps us to potentially win the game. And the pick for this deck is Psychosis Crawler. It's 5 mana for a star Phyrexian Horror. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand, so it's very dependent on you having at least 1 card in your hand, which isn't hard. And whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life. So this is where, if our attacks are stalling, if combat isn't doing what we want to, we're going to be able to drain our opponents through the card draw aspect of our commander, which, again, on its own, if we draw this, if we have this down, attack with our commander, we've got 6 wolves on the battlefield, draining each opponent for 6. That's significant. That's not a drop in the bucket there, and you have the potential of going even crazier with that. So this card will win you games. I guarantee it. It's going to be something your opponents are going to want to get off the battlefield as quickly as possible, and something we're going to want to keep on the battlefield for as long as possible. Yeah, that brings us to the end of this deck tech. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, if you can think of any cards that you thought I might have missed or overlooked that I should have included, please put them down in the comments section. I love hearing from you guys. If you're not already, feel free to subscribe, like the video, share it with others. And yeah, until next time, Stay safe, stay thrifty.